The storm wasn't the strangest thing that happened that night. Waking up beside three strangers who looked at me like they had been searching for me their entire lives was. Rain hammered against the towering windows of the mountain estate as if the sky refused to let anyone leave, and the low rumble of thunder echoed through the enormous bedroom before I opened my eyes. My name was Ethan Brooks, and the last thing I remembered was pulling my car onto the shoulder of a lonely highway after the weather alert flashed across my phone warning everyone to seek immediate shelter. An old estate hidden behind iron gates had seemed like my only option. I remembered a kind housekeeper offering me a warm towel, a guest room, and a cup of tea. After that, everything dissolved into silence. Now I was staring at a carved wooden ceiling that belonged in a history magazine, wrapped in a blanket that definitely wasn't mine. Before panic could settle in, I realized I wasn't alone. On my left, a sharply dressed man with dark hair was already awake, sitting perfectly still as if he'd expected this moment. On my right, another man with warm hazel eyes watched me with calm curiosity while a third stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, his broad shoulders outlined by the orange glow of the flames. None of them looked surprised. They looked relieved. I pushed myself upright so quickly the blanket slipped to my lap. "I think you're in the wrong room," I said, trying to laugh even though my heart refused to slow down. The man by the fireplace took one careful step forward. "No," he answered quietly. "We've been waiting for you." Every instinct told me to leave, but another crash of thunder rattled the windows, reminding me the mountain road outside had probably become a river by now. "Who are you?" I asked. The dark-haired man extended his hand with effortless confidence. "Damien Carter." The second smiled politely. "Lucas Bennett." The last gave a brief nod. "Adrian Foster." I recognized every name immediately. 3 CEOs whose companies appeared on business channels almost every week. Men who should have been in glass skyscrapers hundreds of miles apart, not sharing the same isolated estate during the worst storm of the year. "This has to be some kind of misunderstanding," I whispered. Lucas exchanged a glance with Damien before reaching into his jacket and placing an old photograph on the bedside table. My breath caught. The picture showed 3 teenage boys standing beside a much younger child whose face was partly hidden beneath a baseball cap. Even so, I recognized the jacket. I still owned it. I had never seen this photograph before. "That's impossible," I murmured. Adrian looked toward the rain-covered windows before speaking for the first time in a voice steady enough to calm the storm itself. "Impossible is exactly why you're here." Damien slowly rolled back his sleeve, revealing a silver ring engraved with an unfamiliar crest. Lucas wore the same ring. So did Adrian. 3 identical symbols. 3 impossible coincidences. Then all 3 looked directly at me with expressions that held certainty instead of doubt, and in perfect unison they spoke the same words. "We finally found you." Damien was the first to break the silence, but instead of stepping closer, he walked toward the rain-covered windows and folded his hands behind his back as though he needed the storm more than the answer I was waiting for. "You deserve an explanation," he said. "The problem is that each of us remembers that night differently." I frowned. "What night?" Lucas picked up the faded photograph from the bedside table and turned it toward me again. "The night this picture was taken." I stared at the smiling child wearing the familiar blue jacket. The face remained hidden beneath the brim of the baseball cap, but something deep inside me whispered that I already knew the truth. "I do not remember this," I admitted. Adrian remained near the fireplace, watching every expression on my face with quiet concern. "That is exactly what worries us." I crossed my arms, trying to steady my breathing. "You keep talking like we have met before." "I have never seen any of you in my life." Damien slowly nodded. "That is your memory speaking." Lucas gently continued before the tension could rise. "Ethan, 12 years ago there was another storm almost identical to this one. Roads closed. Power failed across 3 counties. We were teenagers attending a private leadership retreat on this mountain. You arrived unexpectedly." "That never happened," I answered immediately. Lucas did not argue. Instead, he reached into his wallet and revealed a newspaper clipping sealed inside clear plastic. The date matched 12 years earlier. The headline mentioned an unprecedented mountain storm that had stranded dozens of travelers overnight. My confidence began to weaken. Damien spoke next. "I remember finding you alone in the library. You were reading a book while everyone else panicked." Adrian quietly shook his head. "No. That is not how it happened. I found Ethan outside the greenhouse trying to rescue an injured bird before the rain became dangerous." Lucas smiled faintly. "Both of you are wrong. Ethan spent the evening in the music room. He played an old piano that had not worked for years. I blinked between them. 3 successful men. 3 different stories. None of them sounded fabricated. Each carried the weight of genuine memory. Only one of those stories can be true," I whispered. Damien looked directly into my eyes. "That is what we believed for years." The room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of rain against the glass. Something inside my mind stirred, like an old melody trying to return after years of silence. I closed my eyes for only a second. A flash appeared. Small hands touching dusty piano keys. Warm sunlight through stained glass. Laughter echoing down a hallway. The images disappeared before I could reach them. I opened my eyes quickly. I saw something. Lucas leaned forward without losing his calm. "What did you remember?" I rubbed my forehead. "I do not know. It vanished." Adrian looked relieved rather than disappointed. "That means the memories still exist." Before I could ask another question, the lights flickered once, then twice, before settling again. The house seemed to breathe around us. Somewhere upstairs an old clock chimed, although I could have sworn it had not been working earlier. Damien glanced toward the ceiling with unmistakable recognition. It started again. "What started?" I asked. "None of them answered immediately." Lucas finally gestured toward the hallway. "There is something you need to see." We followed him through long corridors lined with portraits whose painted eyes seemed almost alive beneath the dim lighting. The estate felt less like a home and more like a place preserving forgotten history. At the end of the corridor stood a locked wooden door with an antique brass handle. Lucas produced a small key from his pocket. "Nobody has opened this room since that night." The lock clicked softly. The door slowly swung inward. Dust floated through the pale morning light. Shelves filled with forgotten books surrounded a grand piano resting beneath a tall window. My heartbeat became impossibly loud. Without thinking, I walked across the room, reached toward the piano, and placed my fingers gently on the worn ivory keys. A single note echoed through the library. At that exact moment another memory flashed across my mind, clearer than before. 3 teenage boys standing beside me, each wearing the same silver ring. And someone just outside the doorway whispering, "Do not let him remember his real name." The whisper echoed through my mind long after the sound had disappeared from the silent library. I stepped back from the piano as though the old instrument had revealed something it had protected for years. Damien reached my side first, his voice calm but noticeably lower than before. "What did you hear?" I looked from one face to another, searching for any sign that they already knew the answer. Someone said I was not supposed to remember my real name. The word settled over the room like another layer of dust. Lucas slowly exhaled while Adrian turned toward the doorway as if expecting someone to appear. Damien did not look surprised. He looked disappointed. "Then it is happening sooner than we expected," he murmured. "Stop speaking in riddles," I said. "If you know something, tell me." Lucas rested one hand on the edge of the piano. "We only know pieces of the story. Every answer we found led to another missing page." I frowned. "Then start with the first page." Adrian walked toward an old bookshelf and carefully removed a leather-bound journal, hidden behind several weathered volumes. The cover showed the same silver crest engraved on the rings all 3 men wore. He placed it gently into my hands. This belonged to the caretaker who managed this estate for more than 40 years. I opened the journal carefully. Most of the pages contained ordinary notes about repairs, visitors, and storms that had passed through the mountain. Then one sentence caught my attention. The handwriting suddenly became rushed. It read, "The child arrived safely. The name has been sealed until the proper time." My heartbeat became louder. "The child," I whispered. "Was that me?" Damien answered honestly. "We believe so." I turned another page. Several lines had been removed so neatly that only faint marks remained on the paper. Whoever erased them had taken extraordinary care. "Someone wanted this forgotten," I said. Lucas nodded. "Not forgotten. Hidden." Before anyone could continue, a deep chime echoed through the estate. It did not sound like the old grandfather clock downstairs. It sounded modern. Damien checked his phone for the first time that morning. His expression immediately hardened. "The roads are still closed," he said, "but someone just arrived at the front gate." Adrian frowned. That should not be possible. They exchanged uneasy glances before leading me downstairs through the grand entrance hall. Rain still poured across the stone driveway, yet a long black sedan sat perfectly still beyond the gates as though the storm had chosen not to touch it. A tall man stepped from the vehicle carrying a black umbrella despite the powerful wind. His tailored grey coat looked untouched by the rain. Even from a distance he carried himself with effortless confidence. When the gate slowly opened, he walked toward the front door without hesitation, as though he had visited the estate many times before. Damien quietly moved a half step in front of me. Lucas remained composed, but the warmth in his expression disappeared. Adrian crossed his arms, his eyes never leaving the approaching visitor. A few moments later the front door opened. The stranger entered the foyer, closed his umbrella, and smiled politely. "Good morning," he said. "I apologize for arriving without an invitation, but I could not afford to wait any longer." His gaze settled directly on me. It was not threatening. It was almost familiar. "Ethan Brooks," he continued. "Or should I say the name you have been using?" My pulse quickened. "Who are you?" He offered a courteous nod before answering. "Nathan Pierce." The name meant nothing to me, yet the reaction behind me said everything. Damien became perfectly still. Lucas quietly clenched the folder he had been carrying. Adrian took one deliberate step closer. Nathan noticed all of it and smiled with surprising patience. "You have protected him for 12 years, he said to the three men. "You have done an admirable job." Then he looked back at me with calm certainty. "But none of them can tell you who you really are." I felt the room grow impossibly quiet. Nathan reached into his coat pocket and removed a faded photograph. Unlike the one upstairs, this picture showed the young boy's face clearly. I stared at it without breathing because I was looking directly at myself. Nathan spoke one sentence that turned every certainty inside me upside down. "Your name was never Ethan Brooks." The photograph trembled slightly in my hands, although I was certain it was my own fingers shaking. The smiling boy in the picture had my face, my eyes, even the small birthmark near my left eyebrow that I had never thought twice about. Beneath the image someone had written a single name in elegant handwriting. Owen Ashford. I stared at the letters, waiting for them to feel unfamiliar, but instead an odd sense of recognition settled over me. "That is not possible," I whispered. "My name has always been Ethan Brooks." Nathan's expression remained calm. "It has been for the last 12 years. Damien stepped forward before Nathan could continue. "That is enough." Nathan turned toward him without the slightest hint of fear. "You know I am telling the truth." Lucas gently took the photograph from my hands and examined the back. Another date. Another storm. Another mystery. "Where did you get this?" Lucas asked. Nathan answered without hesitation. "From the woman who protected him before any of us understood what was happening." Adrian's voice became noticeably firmer. "She disappeared years ago, No, Nathan replied. She chose to disappear because someone convinced her it was the only way to keep him safe. Every answer only created more questions. I looked toward Damien. Did you know about this name? He remained silent long enough to answer without speaking. Finally he nodded once. I heard it only one time. My chest tightened. Then why did nobody tell me? Damien met my eyes with unmistakable regret. Because we promised we would never be the ones to decide when you remembered. Before I could respond, Nathan reached into his briefcase and carefully removed a thin folder sealed with a blue ribbon. He placed it on the long entrance table between us. Inside are copies of school enrollment records, medical files, and legal guardianship documents. Every record before your 12th birthday uses the name Owen Ashford. Lucas slowly opened the folder while I watched over his shoulder. The first document showed a smiling child standing beside two adults whose faces somehow stirred a faint ache inside my chest. Their names were listed as Daniel and Claire Ashford. My eyes remained fixed on the image. I could not remember their voices or their faces, yet something inside me quietly mourned them. Who were they? I asked. Nathan answered gently. Your parents. Another memory flickered across my mind. A bright kitchen. Fresh cinnamon rolls cooling beside an open window. A woman laughing while someone lifted me onto a chair so I could reach the counter. The scene disappeared before I could hold on to it. I instinctively pressed my hand against my temple. Adrian immediately noticed. Another memory. I nodded slowly. Only pieces. Nathan took one careful step closer but stopped several feet away, respecting the invisible distance that had formed between us. The memories will return gradually. They always do when someone visits this estate again. I looked at him sharply. Again? Nathan smiled sadly. This was never your first visit. Silence filled the room until Lucas quietly turned another page inside the folder. His expression changed almost instantly. Damien, he said. Look at this. Damien joined him. The document was an attendance roster from a summer leadership retreat held 12 years earlier. 4 names had been highlighted together. Damien Carter. Lucas Bennett. Adrian Foster. Owen Ashford. None of us spoke for several seconds. Adrian finally broke the silence. We were assigned to the same group. Nathan nodded. You spent 3 days together before the storm changed everything. I looked from one familiar face to another, searching for even a spark of recognition. Nothing came except a growing feeling that these strangers had once been important to me. Then tell me what happened, I demanded. Damien slowly closed the folder. That is where our memories stop agreeing. Lucas looked toward the rain beyond the windows. Each of us remembers trying to protect you. Adrian lowered his eyes. But one of us made a choice that erased your past. The words settled heavily over the room. I looked at the 3 men standing before me, each carrying the same silver ring and the same burden of unfinished history. For the first time since waking inside the mountain estate, I realized the greatest mystery was not discovering who I had been. It was discovering which one of them had decided that I should forget. The question lingered in the air long after nobody answered it. I looked at Damien, then Lucas, then Adrian, wondering if one of them had stolen 12 years of my life with a single decision. None of them looked away. Instead, each carried the same expression of quiet regret, as though they had been asking themselves that identical question every day since the storm 12 years earlier. Nathan finally broke the silence. There is one place where the truth might still exist. Damien immediately shook his head. Absolutely not. Nathan ignored him and continued speaking directly to me. The West Wing has remained sealed ever since that retreat ended. Everything inside was left untouched. Lucas frowned. That area is unstable. The estate owner closed it years ago. Nathan offered a faint smile. Or perhaps someone simply did not want anyone searching there. Before another argument could begin, a loud creak echoed somewhere above us. The old house seemed almost alive as another gust of wind swept across the mountain. I surprised myself by speaking first. "I am going." Damien stepped beside me. "You should not." "Why?" I asked. "Because you are afraid of what I might find." Damien opened his mouth but never answered. Adrian quietly retrieved an old brass flashlight from a cabinet while Lucas searched a drawer until he found a faded floor plan of the estate. Neither of them tried to stop me anymore. Minutes later, all 5 of us climbed a narrow staircase hidden behind the grand library. Dust covered every railing. Cobwebs stretched across the corners of the ceiling. It was obvious nobody had entered this section of the house for years. The hallway ended before an enormous oak door secured with an iron chain. Nathan reached into his pocket and produced another antique key. "Where do you keep finding these?" Lucas asked. Nathan smiled politely. "Some families pass down jewelry. Mine passed down responsibilities." The old lock released with a heavy click. As the door slowly opened, stale air drifted into the hallway carrying the scent of old paper and cedar wood. Sunlight filtered through cracked windows, revealing a forgotten sitting room frozen in time. Furniture remained covered with white sheets. A fireplace still held neatly stacked logs waiting for a fire that never came. Along one wall stood several framed photographs from the retreat. I instinctively walked toward them. Most showed groups of smiling teenagers wearing matching blue jackets. Then one photograph stopped me completely. 4 boys stood beside the estate fountain. Damien, Lucas, Adrian, and me. This time my face was fully visible. We were laughing at something outside the frame. My arm rested comfortably across Damien's shoulder while Lucas held a folded map and Adrian balanced an old camera around his neck. None of us looked like strangers. We looked like close friends. "I remember this," Adrian whispered unexpectedly. Everyone turned toward him. He slowly stepped closer to the photograph. "We spent hours trying to solve a scavenger hunt. Ethan. Owen." He paused, uncertain which name. "Belong to me now. You kept insisting the map was wrong." A tiny smile crossed Lucas's face. "You were right. We found the final clue behind the greenhouse instead of the chapel." Damien stared at the photograph without speaking. Something about it unsettled him more than anyone else. My eyes drifted toward the corner of the frame where another figure appeared only partially visible. Someone stood just outside our group. The face had been accidentally cropped away, but one detail remained unmistakable. The person wore the exact same silver ring as the others. "Who is that?" I asked. None of the 3 men answered immediately. Nathan quietly folded his arms. "That," he said, "is the question none of you have been asking." Lucas stepped closer until his face nearly touched the glass. "There were only 4 of us." Nathan gently shook his head. "No. There were always 5. The room became perfectly silent. Adrian slowly counted the visible shadows cast across the ground beneath the photograph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yet only 4 faces appeared in the picture. Damien suddenly inhaled sharply as though another memory had forced its way back. He closed his eyes and whispered something so quietly that I almost missed it. His name was Caleb. At the sound of that unfamiliar name, every grandfather clock throughout the estate began chiming at exactly the same moment, and somewhere deep inside the sealed west wing another door slowly opened by itself. Every clock in the estate fell silent as suddenly as it had begun, leaving only the sound of rain tapping against the old windows. None of us moved for several seconds. The hidden door at the end of the corridor remained slightly open, revealing nothing except darkness beyond its frame. Damien recovered first. "Nobody goes in alone," he said firmly. I nodded without arguing. Whatever answers waited behind that door belonged to all of us now. Adrian picked up the brass flashlight while Lucas carefully folded the old photograph and slipped it into his jacket. Nathan remained unusually quiet, watching the open doorway with an expression that looked more concerned than confident. We crossed the dusty hallway together until we reached the narrow entrance. Beyond it stretched a winding staircase leading downward instead of up. This was never shown on the estate blueprints, Lucas murmured. Nathan answered softly. Only a few people knew it existed. We descended slowly, each step releasing echoes that seemed much louder than they should have been. At the bottom waited a circular room lined with shelves filled with neatly labeled storage boxes. Unlike the forgotten rooms upstairs, this place had been carefully preserved. Nothing looked abandoned. A single desk stood beneath a hanging lamp, and beside it rested an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. Adrian brushed away a thin layer of dust before pressing one of the buttons. To everyone's surprise, the machine immediately began turning. Static filled the room. Then a warm female voice emerged through the speaker. If anyone is hearing this recording, then the promise could no longer protect the child. I froze. Something about her voice felt strangely familiar. The woman continued calmly. My name is Margaret Hale. I was caretaker of Ashford Estate, and I made a choice that history may judge unfairly. Lucas looked toward me. Margaret. I whispered the name without realizing it. Another memory surfaced. An older woman wrapping a blanket around my shoulders while telling me that storms never lasted forever. The image disappeared almost instantly, but this time I remembered her smile. The recording continued. For boys arrived for the leadership retreat. Damien Carter. Lucas Bennett. Adrian Foster. Caleb Mercer. They became inseparable within hours. Damien slowly lowered his head. Hearing the forgotten name spoken aloud seemed to unlock something inside him. Margaret continued. On the second night, a fifth child joined them unexpectedly. Owen Ashford. My breathing became shallow. Following an unforeseen event, one child insisted that Owen's identity must disappear completely. The decision divided the group forever. The tape clicked briefly before resuming. The boy who made that request believed he was saving Owen's future, even if it meant sacrificing his own friendship. Silence filled the room. Adrian looked toward Damien. Lucas did the same. Even Nathan watched him carefully. Damien remained motionless. Finally he spoke. It was me. No one interrupted him. I remembered more than I admitted. Not everything. Only fragments. I remembered adults arguing after the storm. I remembered hearing someone say Owen would never have a normal life if people learned who he was. I thought changing his identity was the only way to give him a chance. His voice carried no excuse, only quiet regret. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the composed executive standing before me with the frightened teenager he had once been. You asked them to erase my past. Damien slowly nodded. I believed forgetting would protect you. Lucas closed his eyes. We argued with you for hours. Adrian added quietly, in the end, we agreed because we trusted you. Nathan folded his arms. You all believed you were making the right choice. I looked back at the tape recorder as the recording reached its final message. Margaret's voice became softer. If Owen ever remembers, do not force the next decision upon him. His future must belong to him alone. The tape stopped. The room became silent once again. I slowly walked toward the desk where a small wooden box rested beneath the recorder. My name was carved into the lid. Not Ethan. Owen. My hands trembled as I lifted the cover. Inside lay a faded friendship bracelet woven from blue and silver thread, along with a folded note written in childish handwriting. I unfolded it carefully. Only one sentence appeared across the page. If we ever forget each other, meet me at the lake before the sunrise. Beneath the message was a single signature. Caleb Mercer. The note remained in my hands long after everyone else had finished reading it. Caleb Mercer. A name that had been missing from every conversation until only minutes ago had suddenly become the center of every unanswered question. I slipped the friendship bracelet around my wrist without thinking. The faded blue and silver threads looked worn by time, yet they fit perfectly, as though they had been waiting for me to return. Nathan quietly studied the bracelet before speaking. He made that himself. I looked up. Immediately. You knew him. Nathan hesitated only briefly. Our families knew each other. Caleb believed promises mattered more than power. Damien slowly sat in the old wooden chair beside the recorder, his usual confidence replaced by visible regret. I remember him arguing with me that night. He kept saying Owen deserved the truth no matter how difficult it became. Lucas leaned against the desk and quietly added, I remember Caleb refusing to leave the lake until sunrise because he believed everyone should make decisions after the storm passed instead of during it. Adrian stared at the note for several seconds before closing his eyes. He smiled even when everyone else was afraid. Hearing their memories felt strangely comforting, yet one question continued growing louder inside my mind. If Caleb cared so much about me, I asked softly, where is he now? The room became silent again. Nathan finally answered. Nobody has seen him since the morning after the retreat ended. My heart sank. He simply disappeared. Nathan nodded. Every search came to the same conclusion. He left without telling anyone where he was going. Damien looked toward me with an expression filled with self-blame. I always believed he left because of my decision. Before anyone could respond, Lucas noticed something carved into the underside of the wooden box. He carefully turned it over, revealing a small compass symbol burned into the wood beside a handwritten sentence. Follow true north when the storm clears. Adrian unfolded the old estate map they had found earlier and spread it across the desk. Lucas placed the box beside it. The compass symbol matched another marking near the edge of the property. Crystal Lake, Lucas whispered. Nathan immediately recognized the location. The lake mentioned in the note. I studied the map carefully. The lake rested nearly 2 miles beyond the main estate, hidden inside protected forest that had not appeared on any public hiking maps. The roads are still flooded, Adrian reminded everyone. Damien checked his phone again. The weather alert says the storm will end before sunrise tomorrow. My pulse quickened. Sunrise. The exact moment. Mentioned in Caleb's message. Nathan looked directly at me. If he expected you to remember, that is where he would have left the next clue. I glanced once more at the friendship bracelet around my wrist. Another memory surfaced without warning. 5 boys sitting beside a calm lake while the first rays of sunlight reflected across the water. Someone laughing as we buried a small metal box beneath a large oak tree. I could not see every face, but I clearly heard one voice saying, no matter what happens, we meet here again. The memory faded, leaving only certainty behind. I know that place, I whispered. Damien slowly stood. Then we go together. I looked at him and gently shook my head. Not because you promised 12 years ago. Because this time I am choosing. Damien gave a quiet nod, accepting the difference without argument. For the first time since waking inside the estate, I felt as though the next step belonged to me instead of my forgotten past. Just then a notification sounded from Nathan's phone. He read the message, and every trace of calm disappeared from his face. Someone else knows you have remembered, he said quietly. A private helicopter has already taken off for the estate. Lucas frowned. Who? Nathan slowly lowered the phone. The only person who never stopped searching for Owen Ashford. At that exact moment lightning illuminated the rain-soaked windows above us, and in the brief flash I noticed a fresh signature written beneath Caleb's name on the old note, words that none of us had seen before. I will not come alone. The final line beneath Caleb's signature refused to leave my mind as dawn slowly approached beyond the storm clouds. I will not come alone. Those 5 words transformed every memory we had uncovered into a warning instead of an invitation. Nathan folded his phone and looked toward the windows where the rain had finally begun to weaken. The helicopter cannot land while the weather is this unstable, he said. That gives us a little time, but not much. Damien immediately reached for the estate map again. If Crystal Lake is our destination, we leave before sunrise. Lucas nodded in agreement, but Adrian remained unusually quiet. His attention rested on the friendship bracelet around my wrist. "Do you feel different?" he asked. I considered the question carefully. "Not different," I answered honestly. "More complete. Every memory is still fragmented, but now they feel connected instead of random." As if to prove my own words, another image surfaced without warning. 5 teenagers standing beneath a massive oak tree beside calm water. Caleb laughed while lowering a small metal box into the ground. Damien argued that nobody would ever find it again. Lucas carefully drew a map that everyone immediately lost. Adrian promised he would remember the exact location without needing directions. Then all 5 of us placed one hand above the buried box and made a promise together. "Whatever happens, the truth belongs to Owen." I opened my eyes sharply. "The box," I whispered. "It is real." Adrian looked at me with quiet surprise. "You remembered?" I nodded. "We buried something together." Nathan slowly smiled for the first time since arriving. Then Caleb expected this day long before any of us did. Within minutes we left the hidden archive and returned to the main entrance. Outside, the mountain no longer felt trapped beneath the storm. Grey clouds drifted apart as pale morning light spread across the valley. The road remained impassable, forcing us onto an old hiking trail that wound through towering pine trees toward the lake. The air smelled fresh after hours of rain, and each step forward seemed to pull another forgotten feeling from somewhere deep inside my mind. Lucas walked beside me carrying the old map while Damien led the way. Adrian stayed a few steps behind, quietly watching the surrounding forest. Nathan matched my pace without speaking until we reached a narrow wooden bridge crossing a fast-moving stream. "There is something you deserve to know before we reach the lake," he finally said. I turned toward him. "What is it?" Nathan looked ahead rather than at me. "Everyone believes Caleb disappeared after the retreat." He paused briefly. "That is only half the truth." Damien stopped walking. "Nathan." His warning came too late. Nathan continued anyway. "Caleb chose to disappear because someone offered him a choice. Stay with Owen and place Owen's future in constant danger, or leave so Owen could live without becoming the center of a family conflict that had lasted generations." My chest tightened. "He left for me." Nathan nodded slowly. "Every decision made that week was made by people who believed they were protecting you." None of us spoke again until the trees finally opened, revealing Crystal Lake exactly as I had seen it in my memories. Morning mist floated above the calm water while the enormous oak tree stood proudly near the shoreline, untouched by time. My feet carried me toward it before anyone else moved. Without hesitation I knelt beside the thick roots and brushed away years of fallen leaves. My fingers struck metal almost immediately. The others gathered around as I carefully lifted a weathered steel box from the earth. Rust covered the corners, but the lock had already broken with age. I slowly opened the lid. Inside rested 5 friendship bracelets identical to the one around my wrist, a faded disposable camera, and 5 sealed envelopes. For displayed familiar names. Damien. Lucas. Adrian. Owen. The 5th envelope was addressed to Caleb himself. Beneath them lay one final item, a folded newspaper dated only 3 days after the retreat. Across the front page appeared a photograph of a teenage boy smiling beside an unfamiliar older man. I stared at the face until recognition struck with impossible certainty. It was Caleb, older than the memories I carried, proving he had not vanished immediately after leaving the estate. Then Damien quietly pointed toward the opposite side of the lake. Standing beneath the morning sunlight was a lone man wearing the same silver ring, watching us with a gentle smile that felt both familiar and impossible. The man across the lake did not move. He simply stood beneath the towering oak tree with the morning sunlight breaking through the last fading clouds behind him. His silver ring reflected the light exactly like the ones Damien, Lucas, and Adrian still wore. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then the stranger smiled with unmistakable warmth, the kind of smile that belonged to someone greeting old friends instead of unexpected visitors. My heart recognized him before my memories fully did. "Caleb," I whispered. He slowly crossed the narrow wooden dock without rushing, stopping several feet away as though he wanted me to choose the final distance myself. "Hello, Owen," he said gently. Hearing that name no longer felt foreign. It felt like opening a door that had been locked for years. Damien lowered his eyes. Lucas quietly stepped back. Adrian did the same. None of them tried to stand between us. Caleb looked toward the three men with kindness instead of resentment. "You kept your promise," he said. Damien shook his head. "Not perfectly." Caleb smiled. "No. But you kept him safe." Nathan remained silent, allowing the moment to belong to the people who had lived it. I looked down at the sealed envelope bearing my name. My fingers carefully opened it, revealing a single handwritten letter folded several times. The paper had yellowed with age, but the writing remained clear. "Owen, if you are reading this, it means you remembered because you were ready, not because someone forced you. That is the only ending I ever wanted for you. Do not waste your life deciding which of us made the biggest mistake. We were only children trying to protect our best friend with the little wisdom we had. Forgive us if you can, but most importantly forgive yourself for forgetting. You never abandoned us. You were simply given another chance to grow without carrying burdens that never belonged to you. If we meet again, I hope it is because you chose to come back, not because someone brought you here." I lowered the letter as another memory finally returned in perfect clarity. 5 boys laughing beside the lake. 5 hands stacked together. 5 voices making one promise. No matter where life takes us, nobody owns Owen's future except Owen himself. Tears blurred my vision, not from sadness but from relief. The missing pieces had finally become one complete picture. I looked first at Damien. "You believed forgetting would save me." He nodded quietly. I turned toward Lucas. "You never stopped searching for the truth." He smiled. Then I faced Adrian. "You stayed. Because you hoped I would remember one day." He answered with a simple nod. Finally I looked at Caleb. "And you walked away so I could choose my own life." Caleb's eyes reflected the same peaceful certainty they had carried in every memory. "That choice was always yours." The sound of distant helicopter blades echoed across the mountains before fading away again. Nobody paid attention anymore. Whatever conflict had once surrounded my identity no longer mattered. The greatest battle had never been against another family or another secret. It had been between fear and trust, between holding on to the past and allowing the future to begin. I slowly removed the friendship bracelet from my wrist, then held it beside the 4 matching bracelets inside the metal box. "We buried these because we were afraid we would forget each other," I said softly. "We do not need to hide them anymore." One by one, Damien, Lucas, Adrian, and Caleb each took their own bracelet. We stood together beneath the old oak tree exactly as we had 12 years earlier, only this time there were no frightened children trying to solve impossible problems. There were 5 people finally free to tell the truth. Damien looked at me carefully before speaking. "Whatever name you choose from this day forward, we will respect it." I smiled for the first time since the storm began. "Then let me choose." I looked across the calm water reflecting the golden sunrise. I was born Owen Ashford. I lived as Ethan Brooks. Both names shaped the person standing here today. I do not have to erase either one. Caleb laughed softly. "That sounds exactly like you." As the first full rays of sunlight reached the lake, I realized the words spoken the morning I woke inside the estate no longer held any power over me. Nobody needed to tell me that I belonged to them because the greatest truth I had uncovered was far simpler. I was finally home because I had chosen the path that led me there.